welcome to the Georgetown Lawn and Landscape Clinic. I think what we're going to do is start out with Mike Nickerson from Noonan's that is here tonight, and he's going to start a little kind of, you might call it an experiment, or it reminds you of an experiment. Mike, if you want to come up here and explain this quickly. Basically, we have some crystals here that look sort of like sugar that they sell at Noonan's, and we're going to put some in a beaker, and then I'm going to give my talk, and during the time I give my talk, you'll see how these crystals expand and draw in the water and hold the water, and then afterwards Mike will explain how all this works. But first of all, we're just going to put some of the sugar-like substance in the beaker and add some water, and you'll see how it expands.
This is one of the products that is available that we actually use on all of our exterior baskets that we do. A lot of people in the town, Georgetown, Newburyport, Haverhill, all those boxes that you see hanging up, all the planters, all those. What we add to every single one of those planters is this particular product here. It's an organic product that will not harm basically the environment. It does break down over time, so it's not a permanent thing. What it does, it expands immensely, and what that does is it grabs and holds any water that's there, and it doesn't allow it to evaporate off. That's probably where most water is lost, is due to evaporation and runoff are probably the two single water loss problems. So if you can alleviate those or slow that down, you're going to hold a lot more water, and you're going to be able to do less frequent waterings and less of it. And what this product basically is, it's a very light little grain. It looks like almost like sea salt. It's in a granular form, and this expands immensely. This right here is about a teaspoon. Okay, this whole thing. A lot of people will want to take this and they want to, shake it all in their planter boxes and whatnot. They all have directions on the back on how much you should use and what you should use. And what again, it expands greatly, so it's a product that you shouldn't overuse. Just for kind of a quick little, that's all I'm going to add in there. I'll put what I have in my hand in there. And if you want to add some water to that, maybe we can see in a little bit.
So just fill it about
that's
half
about a
full?
teaspoon. That's probably actually too much right there.
Put some back?
You might, or else it'll be like a little volcano. It's not very quick. It takes some time.
Is that still
Yeah,
too much?
that's fine.
And fill it about half full of water?
Fill the whole thing.
3/4. 3/4. All right. Watch it grow.
And what it does is it again can cut down your watering on your baskets by about 50%. And we use it predominantly for cost. Okay, we pay one of our guys to go downtown and to water these things. Anybody that's seen him 5 o'clock in the morning that gets up early, he's down there with his water truck watering. If we can pay him half as much time, that's a savings of 50%. Not only in water, but also in cost.
Just a little stuff that looks like sugar on the bottom, all the rest is water, and we'll set it here and watch the crystals grow.
It also comes in a couple different forms. You'll see it in these crystals. This is generally used for, again, container type plantings, small bedding areas as such. There's also types that can be used in a hose end type. This can be applied directly to your lawn. It attaches directly to your hose. And it's basically just a smaller granular version of this. It's in a liquid form. It's a smaller crushed up version of this that will go through the sprayer. And what it does is it will take any water when it rains. It'll also take any moisture that just from dew in the morning even, and it will absorb it and keep that top layer of soil damp. And again, if you can retain that water, that's the key, to really healthier plants, is being able to water, and being able to water less often is going to conserve your time, your energy, along with the water itself. And so it is also available in a hose end type. spray. It can be used. It is, again, it's organic, so it's not anything that would harm if you wanted to put it in your vegetable garden, if you wanted to use like the soil moist in tomato planters. You know, a lot of people are doing that nowadays rather than doing a plot in their yard. So these are two very good products that, and the seeds nowadays too are starting to come along with this. Scott's is one company out there. You may have noticed, may or may not have noticed, they call this Water Smart technology. And basically what it is, it's, if you can really see this, it's basically like a candy coating of this that is around the grass seed. And again, what that is there for is to absorb the water, to hold it. And if you can, again, keep it damp, it's going to help it germinate and retain that much more water. So these are all three basically same similar products, just kind of found in three different forms. Some are incorporated fertilizers, even are starting to have some of this in it as well. You know, granular form for baskets and the hose end type sprayer for larger areas. You know, the water conservation, you know, we've each day, 2 days and 2 times we've done this now. Both days have been after, you know, biblical rains. Maybe we should just have a conservation meeting and, you know, that'll stop that. But really, it is a big issue. It will be a big issue as time goes on. There's no more water. What we have is what we have here. So conserving it, keeping it clean, you know, it really has to be a priority. There are places in the world where you can't drink the water. There are places in the world where you can't plant what you want to plant because there is no water. I don't want to live like that, you know, and I don't think anybody in this room wants to. So unless people are smart about what they're doing with their water and how their resources are kept up, you know, there will be issues later on. You know, so it's really smart to conserve your own resources. It is everybody's resource here, and you know, it is something that, you know, we all take part in. You know, you may not think about it, but when you know, you got a quart of oil in your basement, you want to get rid of it, don't just run it across the street and dump it in the sewer. Wherever you bought that, it has to be taken back from that store. You know, a lot of people don't know that. You buy a quart of oil at CVS, technically they have to take it back and they have to dispose of it properly. They can't tell you no. If you bought it there, they have to take it back. So don't just take it in the backwoods and dump it. Eventually that will get down into the ground level, into the groundwater, and contaminate it for everybody. You know, so conservation, using what you have and not wasting it, making sure you're getting the full benefit out of it. Again, these products kind of do that. And then when there is, you know, a lot, an abundance, somehow try and save it. Rain barrels, very big. I talked a little bit to the gentleman over at the water department. He's got some access to some barrels. We're trying to work out something. I haven't touched base with him in the past couple of weeks just because of everything that's going on with the water right now. And trying to maybe set up something that we can get a rain barrel program going for the town. Haverhill, Danvers, a lot of the local communities do that. So somehow, you know, we'll see if we can work something together to make it, you know, come in basically at cost. You know, so. Anybody have any questions on any of this stuff or anything?
What's the name of the product?
There's Soil Moist, the Organic Water Wizard, and then Water Smart, or Smart Water is what the Scotch uses. It's basically, it's a type of, it is a plastic, but it's a biodegradable an animal, from animal fat. It does break down, but it is a type of plastic. They actually use a lot of it to package foods nowadays, and it does. It is a product that will break down. Yep.
Now this product retains moisture.
Retains water, yes.
In the top layer of the soil.
If it's, the deeper you scratch it in, or the deeper it gets in, the deeper it'll hold.
Yes. You had a hose end applicator.
Yeah.
Now, wouldn't that promote growth of,
At top,
Moss?
and people do ask that, the roots are gonna stay towards the top layer of that?
I mean, moss constantly
Yep.
survives on damp, wet soil.
Yes, 3 reasons for moss, and I have a lot of people that come in and I need moss cover. Moss it takes 3 things to prevent it or get rid of it. It needs water, it needs acidic soil, and it needs compacted soil. Those 3 items, if you can alleviate those 3 items right there, you will alleviate your moss problem. Water, you gotta be able to maybe open up some light to the area so it can dry out. Clay soils, very organic, rich soils are very compacted. If you basically matted it down in a clay form, and you tried to pour water into it, if you made it like into a bowl, the water probably wouldn't go through it because the soil is very clay, very organic. Adding gypsum or sand to that area will allow the water to drain through the soil. If the water can drain through, you won't get that moss on the top layer.
Yes, but
So-
if you do the whole.
This particular product, if you have a mossy area,
You don't want
chances are it's not something you want to be using that area. So, you know, it's really intended for those sunny, full sun areas, containers that dry out very quickly, things like that. Again, we use it in everything, and we take a chance. There's been years that, oh my God, we're holding too much water. You know, so, you know, you just kind of, most times, more often than not, we need the water. It's not really an issue of raining every day.
How many times do you apply it?
Once,
Just once?
just once. Once a season if you're doing like a lawn. In the containers, pretty much once. And people usually refresh. It will stay there for a little longer than that, but we do suggest that you change it out. Just swap it, you know, when you mix up your new batch of soil.
You wouldn't use that in the seed bed then?
Oh yeah, you could use it in the garden. Yeah. But again, we had a lot of blight last year, tomato blight, too much water. So you're playing a game, you know, you gotta, it's a gamble. And
I don't know how much to water, if you put it in a planter.
what
how
it
do you know
does is
how
when you
much
water,
water?
most of the water is being poured out the bottom. If you actually measured how much you actually put into the planter versus how much actually poured out the bottom when you were done, I bet you'll find in most cases more water poured out the bottom. What this does is it'll hold it, so it doesn't have the ability to drench out. Okay, so therefore you don't have to water. You can skip. You can begin to, you know, skip every other day, every 4th day. And again, that's why we use it in the town, so we don't have to, again, pay somebody to do it and do it, you know, by filling up the water truck, bringing it downtown, and doing it every single day. We can get away with doing it every other day, or sometimes even longer, if it's cloudy or whatnot. So all those hanging baskets that you see, you know, every single one of them has this in it. New report all over. So
But if you water a pot, do you fill it so that you see some water coming out the bottom and then stop
well,
and not re-water?
I wouldn't use it on interior things. Your exterior things are going to dry out. They're going to dry out fairly quickly, regardless, just because the sun itself is going to dry it out. Weight. I always tell people weight is the biggest thing you can measure your plant by. I have more people come in, I bring in a hanging basket, bring in a house plant, bring in whatever in. This plant, you know, it's dead. I watered it, it's dead. And you take it out and you can squeeze it and pours out the water. Most people kill the plants with too much water. This will kind of alleviate that. It'll hold it, but it won't be spongy. It won't be soaking wet. And there are other things that you can do too. You can top dress your lawn with peat moss. That's a good way you can do it. Very, very skim layer to it. Finally rake it over the top when it rains, or again, if you just even the morning dew. In the morning, you know, if you walk out first thing in the morning, there's that dew, even in the middle of summer. It'll always be there. You just need something there to capture that, instead of when the sun comes up, it evaporates away. This type of product, peat moss, those things will hold it, and just so you don't have to water it. I mean, it's the reason why we have peat moss in our potting soils, essentially. And most people, potting soil doesn't even contain soil, most of it. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. Yes?
But, so in other words, this is on the top inch or
Yes.
two
Yeah.
of the soil, so it's retaining the moisture beneath that layer?
Yes.
It's
yeah.
preventing it from evaporating?
Yes.
Well, does it ever, I know it absorbs the water, does it
Yeah.
ever release it?
Yes, because it's keeping it cool and damp, it's, you know, a dog will scratch into the top layer of dirt
Okay.
to get down to that cooler, damp section. If you can, evaporation needs to take place when it gets sunny and gets exposed to the heat. This keeps it cool, you keep it cooler, there's less evaporation, you're not losing the water as quickly. You know,
Right.
so it's really, if you think of it as it's on a big scale, if you had a sponge and you laid it out, you know, on the ground, you picked up that sponge a few hours later, you'd probably have a wet square
Sure.
right there. It stayed damp. The only reason it stayed damp is because the sponge, you know, it didn't evaporate. You didn't lose that to evaporation. So essentially, that's what it is. It's sucking in like a sponge, holding the water, so everything just stays a little more consistent damp, but not so damp that it's like water.
When does it release it during the dry time?
Well, because it's cool. Plants don't like drink through straws. I mean, it's on a, you know, microscopic scale, really. I mean, it'll pull even the small amounts, you know, out of the soil. And just that little bit extra means a big, you know, a big difference. Like I said, it'll cut down, you know, our plant watering by about 50%.
You said it was a plastic and an animal fat, so
It's
petroleum product?
it's a product made from an animal fat, but you see it in food. You can go to the supermarket, and I can't honestly. It's got a very long technical name on it.
What is it?
It's a I'll let you try it. But it's you can get like you see it in the grocery stores. The lettuce comes in it. It's basically a biodegradable plastic. I know, you know, it sounds crazy, but there is such an animal. And what it's made up is, it's like an animal fat. And they somehow refine it and make it, and that's what it's made out of. You know, it's a technical word.
Oh, thanks.
Polysaccharides. So.
This, I just want to call your attention to our science experiment here. We're about probably over halfway to the top of the water. When we started out that little tiny amount in the bottom, and it's still growing. So just thought I'd.
And you know, it's totally, it's like jelly. It's not greasy. It's, you know, water. Some florists actually use this, and they'll use it for their cut flowers. So it looks like water, or it looks like ice, and they'll stand their flowers up there. So it's, you know, it's used in the florist shop as well. It's another.
And the root zone can absorb more moisture?
Yep, there's,
It can
if you
pull it
take
out.
this and you squeeze this out, all that water's in there.
Mhm.
Although it's fairly, you know, dry and, you know, it's got a consistency of jelly. I don't know if you want to pass around maybe, and people want to take a look at it, see what it's like. It's, you know, it's, feel free to pick it up and play with it. And I always thought it'd be kind of cool to fill up a swimming pool with it. You know, it's probably like quicksand though.
All right. Are there further questions for Mike? If not, we'll continue with the program.
Just one of them.
One more.
One of those containers,
Yep.
how much,
This on retail price, this is $30, okay?
how many?
This, just to give you a size, they give you trees and whatnot in here too for planting. For like 10-inch plants, 2 teaspoons, okay, for a 10-inch pot. So, a ball and burlap tree, a 4-inch caliper tree, okay? They're saying 8 ounces, so 4-inch caliper tree, you know, that's a pretty good sized tree. 4 ounces, you know, which is like a tablespoon. This is a 3-pound jug, so you can see how far this goes. It goes quite a ways. Again, you just need this tiny, tiny amount. Biggest thing I've seen people do is add too much of it. They just kind of, you know, 1 is good, let me add 2. And that's a big no-no too. And that goes for anything. That goes for your fertilizers, your water, your, you know, anything really. You should follow the directions.
Mike, you might want to explain what happens when you overdo it in a hanging basket.
It actually will kind of like mushroom out. Like if this is overfilled, what'll happen is this will eventually just kind of, you know, very slowly just kind of ooze out. And next thing you know, you'll have this mound of dirt oozing out the top of the pot.
Attack of the blob.
Yeah, and it's just, and if you let this totally dry out, like say you leave this stuff alone and you don't do anything with it, if you just left it like this, it reverts back to this granule. You know, but
Sorcerer's
it's no,
Apprentice crystals.
what's that?
Sorcerer's Apprentice crystals.
Yeah, yeah, but it'll eventually, you know, working it gets basically ground up. It's like jelly and breaks down and then
Where do you
it's gone.
store it over the winter?
Just keep it dry. It can be cold, it can be hot,
It can be cold.
just, you
How
know,
many
get wet.
seasons will it go through?
Um,
Is it good for years or?
The product itself, dry, you could leave this, if you bought this, this would be more than probably everybody in this room combined. If you put this in your garage, as long as, again, it's dry, it'll store indefinitely, you know, as long as it's sealed and it doesn't get the water to it. Once it gets the water, then it's gonna begin to break, you know, to break down.
Right.
Used, it would be about a year. 1 season is what we, you know, we replace it when we do our planters. Because it's just impossible to get them. You can't get this out of the soil and, you know, it just.
Cutting animal safe and all
Yep,
that.
yep.
One more question.
It's not a question, I just wanted to add to, I've been using that for years. And if you put it in a little like container and you add water, and as you go around doing what you're going to do in the spring and summer for your containers and in your garden, all you have to do is scoop it out and throw it in the hole. It's already full of water. If you put it in a container dry, you have to really water that container well the first time to get those
Yes,
crystals to
that's
absorb.
actually, yes.
So I like it to pre-mix it, have it ready in a closed bucket, and just carry it around when I'm doing my planting.
And it's already expanded, so you already kind of know
You know how much room it's
how
gonna
much
take.
room it's going to
Right.
take up. Because that's, it
No
does swell probably 1,000 times the size, so.
Thank you, you're welcome.
That's actually a good point.
I think you have one more question over here, Mike?
Just from a runoff perspective, does it break down and become soluble, and would it?
It just basically just breaks down over time and it dissolves up. I mean, it's like a jelly, and the more it's worked, and you know, sunlight will break it down, and it just breaks down. I mean, anything natural will break down over time anyways, but about a year. I mean, if you were to take it and, you know, keep it kind of in the jelly form, eventually it's not so chunky, it's a little less chunky, then it's kind of syrupy, and then it's kind of water, and then it's kind of gone. You know, over time, you know, it's about a year, a little more than that if you were just to leave it and keep it watered and watch it, stir it, let it sit, stir it, you know, let it sit. You know, it would eventually just kind of break down, first smaller chunks, then into like a syrup, and then kind of just into plain old water. And then,
But it will remain where it is.
yeah, it's still in
won't
there,
become a
I mean, but
component
it
of
just, it stops its own, you know, it doesn't have the ability to swell and contract and swell.
Migrate.
It's actually stuff they use, some of the diaper manufacturers use it.
Does this work good on basement carpets?
Mike Clog has shopped that. So, actually, that, you know, there may be other, I mean, you know, that's how ideas start, I guess. You know, put it in a sock and use it as a water barrier, you know.
There you go.
Okay, well, I guess we'll keep rolling here. Our
Alright.
time is a little bit limited tonight, they're gonna run us out of here in about an hour, so.
Okay.
Want to get through the program. Thank you very much, Mike, that's.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Lowenstein. I'm involved with the Georgetown Water Conservation Grant that the Department of Environmental Protection has awarded the town to try to reduce water use in Georgetown. I actually come from Sharon, where we've reduced our water use by about 20% over the last 5 years. We're going to try and see if we can use some of the same approaches to improve water use efficiency in Georgetown. So, George, if you could just advance to the next slide here. Just the down arrow, there you go. Water conservation is good stuff. It saves money, it helps the environment, and improves drinking water quality. Next slide, please. In Georgetown, the water rates are what they call ascending block rate water prices, so that the more water you use, the more you pay per 100 cubic feet. The water bills come in 100 cubic foot increments. And you can see what happens if you use the blocks go from 0 to 2,500 cubic feet, from 26, well, it's actually 2,500 to 5,000, excuse the typo, and over 5,000 cubic feet. And you can see how the rates go from $3.95, $4.95 to $5.95. But when you multiply it out, if you just use 1,000 cubic feet and a quarter, you're looking at $40. If you use 2,500 cubic feet, it's $99. 5,000 cubic feet is $223, which, notice, when you go from 2,500 to 5,000, you double your water use, but you more than double the cost. You're going from about $100 to $223. And then if you go from 5,000 to 7,500, again, the total amount of money starts to really go up. Next slide, please. In Georgetown, like most suburban communities in Massachusetts, water usage in summer escalates a lot. You can see that these are the 12 months of the year, and in the winter time you're using about maybe 17 million gallons per month, and then in summer it balloons up to something like 27 million gallons per month. So it really, and when you think about it, when is water the scarcest? When it's hot and dry in summer. That's when the environment is most in need of water, and yet that's when we turn it way up. So we want to see what we can do about that using products like the crystals that Mike showed us from Noonan's. Next, please. The Parker River is classified as highly stressed by the Massachusetts Water Resources Commission. On the left you can see the Parker River under normal circumstances, but when it gets hot and dry and the water usage, as you saw in the previous slide, goes through the roof, then it draws down the water table and the Parker River dries up. Next, please. So who cares about the Parker River? So what if it's a mud hole? Well, it turns out that there are some endangered species that depend on water in the environment, such as Blanding's turtles, and there's a very active group in Georgetown which is striving to restore the population of Blanding's turtles, which are, I think, threatened. Is that right, George? Yeah. There's three, so there's special concern, threatened, and endangered, right. And they're at the threatened level, and there's 50-odd turtles in Georgetown, or
yeah, 61 adults have been marked.
61 adults. So it's not, there are very few of them left, and it takes 15 years before they
stop breeding.
Before they reach sexual maturity and they can reproduce. So it's very easy to reduce the population and very hard to get it back up again. Blanding's turtles are not the only problematic species in Georgetown. There are blue-spotted salamanders that depend on the vernal pools, many of which there are quite a cluster of certified vernal pools in the vicinity of the town wells. And so that's an issue too. And in addition, you've got herring. There's a group of people who are monitoring the herring runs, and if if you go to the Parker River Clean Water Association website, you can see graphs of the annual herring counts, and it's a pretty precipitous decline. And of course, they depend on flow in the river to spawn and reproduce. So we really, have a lot to lose if we don't manage our water resources intelligently. Next, please. In addition to the critters, we've got issues with our water quality too. I'm sure not most people are going to be aware of the fact that the water quality is somewhat problematic in Georgetown. There is a filtration plant which removes iron and manganese from the well water, the 3 municipal wells in Georgetown. If you think about it, this filtration plant is designed to remove, to clean up a certain amount of throughput on a daily basis, and it is capable of keeping up with demand in summer. But the more water you try to drag through that filtration plant, the harder it is for the filtration plant to get every last bit. I mean, iron and manganese is not poison. It's not going to hurt you, but it's unsightly. It might stain your laundry. It might turn the water a little tea-colored, etc. And it's just more problematic to get the water as pure as you'd really like it if you're pulling more water through the filtration plant, much of which is used for what's referred to as non-essential water use, like watering your lawn. So if there's some alternative to watering your lawn, if you can still have a nice lawn without watering it, hey, we're all better off. We have better water quality. Do you have a question, Mike?
Yes, where, is it well water in town? Do they draw from the ponds? I don't actually know.
Well water. 3
It's up?
municipal wells.
3 wells?
Yeah.
Where are they located?
They're in the western part of town.
Off West Street.
2 at West Street.
Off West Street, and then there's one off Bailey Lane.
Okay, next please. And they are in the vicinity of the Parker River, I might add, or the headwaters of the Parker River. In 2008, Georgetown's municipal water supply wells pumped 99% of their Department of Environmental Protection allocation. The DEP, as part of the Water Management Act, the DEP assigns limits or allocates a certain amount of water to each community based on some kind of perception of, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but basically the Department of Environmental Protection is responsible for protecting the environment, so they don't let you take unlimited amounts of water out of the ground and dry up your water resources. And you can see that Georgetown in 2008 used 272 million gallons. The allocation was 274. That's all the permit allows the town to remove from the ground in the municipal wells. So we're sort of bumping up against the limit of what we're allowed to take out of the ground. Next, please. It is possible to significantly reduce water use without really any significant adverse effects on quality of life. The MWI water system over the last 25 years or so has driven water use down from about 340 million gallons a day to under 200 million gallons a day, which is remarkable when you consider that over that same time frame, Boston's population has increased by approximately 10%. So it's not only, and in addition, MWA has added a few new communities, and yet the aggregate amount, the total amount of water that's sold by the MWA system, it has dropped by 1/3. So, and you don't see people dying of thirst in Boston. I mean, life goes on. I don't think it's any particular hardship. It's just a question of using water more efficiently. Next, please. And in our suburban community of Sharon, I mentioned before we had reduced our water use by 20%.
Excuse me,
Yes,
isn't the MWRA's number relevant that they believe 30% of that decrease in water usage is due to bottled water?
oh no, not bottled water, but the amount that we drink is a tiny percentage of the total amount of water that we use when you think of showers, laundry, faucets for washing, also dishwashers, and the water we use outdoors just dwarfs the amount we drink, so
They also have an active program to detect leaks.
that had a lot to do
That
with it.
was, I mean, there was
Park-
a
yes.
swimming pool
Yes.
in Alston right along the Charles River. It was, and they couldn't shut it down because of the children there. but it was leaking somewhere in the vicinity, I wanna say, of like 4,000 or 6,000 gallons a day.
Leaks are a big deal. I'm glad you mentioned that because the water conservation grant that the Department of Environmental Protection has awarded to Georgetown has really three parts. One part is public outreach, like talking to people tonight about what they can do to conserve water. Another part is education in the schools, and we're going to do a program with the third graders at the Pembroke School starting at the end of April. And the third part is leak detection. There is some new leak detection equipment which will help the water department locate leaks in the water mains. Once you find it, then you can dig up the pipe and fix it. So hopefully we'll be able to reduce our total leakage in the town. So water conservation is a little bit from a lot of different parts. Actually, MWA, in addition to fixing all those leaks that you mentioned, they gave away something like 370,000 toilets, in the early days to try to replace inefficient toilets. And a lot of, Massachusetts was the first state in the nation to require these low-flow toilets in the early 90s. Since then, the whole country's followed suit. The technology of toilets has advanced dramatically, so now they actually work very well in addition to using very little
Why
water.
haven't we gone to the two-flush toilet?
Good question. 3 states in the country already have. Massachusetts is no longer in the vanguard here. We're no longer number 1. The best we could possibly do is the 4th state. The 3 other states have already gone that route and required them. It's a phase-in. So hopefully our leaders at Beacon Hill will get the message at some point and also require in Massachusetts that when people replace the toilet, they put the high-efficiency toilets in.
What is a two-flush toilet?
A two-flush toilet, they're also called dual-flush toilets. There's actually a whole category of toilets called high-efficiency toilets that use less than 80% of the low-flow 1.6, so it's 1.3 or less. And there are 2 kinds of low-flow toilets. One is the dual-flush and one is a pressure assist. And the dual-flush, what it does is it uses the 1.6 for solid waste, but it only uses like 1 gallon per flush for liquid waste, and there's usually about 3 liquid flushes for every solid flush. So that brings the average down below 1.3, and those qualify as high-efficiency toilets. They're very common in Europe. I mean, you don't need as much water for liquid waste as for solid waste, so it makes sense to have a dual system where you push the big button for solid waste and the little button for liquid waste, and you save water.
It saves your septic system.
I'm sorry?
It saves your septic
Saves
system.
your septic system, thank you very much. Water conservation is about saving water, it's also about saving money. I don't know how many of you people have met others who have sold their homes and had to spend $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 because their septic system doesn't pass Title V. If you have a front-load washing machine and a high-efficiency toilet and you're putting less water through that septic system, it's no guarantee that you're going to escape Title V, but your chances are better that your leach field won't be clogged if you're not putting through so much water through there. Next slide, please. Oh, go back one. I just want to point out that in our town, by virtue of reducing our water use 20%, we're saving over $70,000 in electricity to run our municipal wells, and also in the combination of electricity plus treatment chemicals. We're saving $70,000 a year in just that cost, and that's really the tip of the iceberg, because of the fact that we conserved, we can accommodate new development, which is in the pipeline for our town, without importing water from either the desalinization plant, the new one in Dayton, or which is available to us, but at a very high cost, because we have to pay for the pipe and everything else, and then we have to buy the water, which is much more expensive than our well water, or we could turn to MWA and get water from them. So we're dodging a huge cost bullet by conserving. It's a much lower cost solution for the community than trying to increase water supply with decreased demand. It's a much more practical approach. Next, please. Water use efficiency can be greatly improved with no compromise in quality of life. The Georgetown average water use in 2008 was 67 gallons per person per day, which is actually very close to the state conservation standard of 65 gallons per capita per day. Melbourne, Australia, by contrast, I found this out from my daughter who just moved there to go to graduate school. She sent me a link to their website, and I found out they're using 39 gallons per capita per day in a pretty good sized city. I mean, Melbourne is not a small town. In our household in Sharon, we're using 25 gallons per capita per day. You know, I shower at home, I work at home, my office is at home. I don't belong to a health club, so I wish I did, but I don't. And so I don't shower somewhere else. You know, I'm using, all my water needs are taken care of at home. And the real key is not watering our lawn. We also have a front load washing machine, and we have, you know, high efficiency toilets. So, and we have the faucet areas. It's, like I said before, conservation is the sum of lots of little parts. And if you tighten every little thing, all of a sudden your water use drops. Sharon's, as a town, is using something like in the mid-60s. It bounces around from year to year. So it's very similar to Georgetown. So what that means is for every household like mine that's using 25 gallons per capita per day, if the average is 65, someone else must be using 105. So there's a lot of low fruit, a lot of potential for saving here. Next, please. Up to 70% of the water used for lawn irrigation is lost to evaporation. That is, of course, if you don't use Mike's solution, which would hold the water. But on a hot, dry day, when you sprinkle water, throw it up in the air, and some of it evaporates immediately, some of it goes into the ground and is brought up by the plants. The grass plants themselves through the roots and then transpires through the leaves. So most of that water, more than half of it, is poof, lost to the atmosphere. A lot of people think that, okay, it's okay to water my lawn, it'll go in the ground and go back to the river. No, most of it's lost to the environment. Unlike water that's used indoors, which goes into a septic system and gets returned to the ground, that water that's used for irrigation is lost. And furthermore, one of the biggest complaints that I get as a member of the water committee in Sharon is when people find out I'm on the committee, the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, you know, my neighbor waters his lawn even when it's raining. It's a very common thing. People have a controller and they set it on to water at certain times. We have lawn irrigation restrictions in Sharon, so they're only allowed to water at certain times. And they turn on the water. They set the controller to go off at those times when it's allowed. And they do it whether or not it's raining out. They just put it on autopilot and forget it. And that can cause fungal diseases such as red thread in the grass. So you can actually be paying extra money to make your lawn sicker, which doesn't make any sense. Next, please. My lawn, this is a picture of my backyard. It looks great most of the year with no irrigation whatsoever. I do not have an irrigation system. I have no way to irrigate my lawn. So I have to do something to make it look good. Natural rainfall, because I really love my lawn. I mean, I don't think I'm unusual in that regard. I think many Americans appreciate having a nice lawn. Like the smell of the cut grass. It's nice to have a green carpet in the yard. The natural rainfall throughout the year in New England averages almost an inch a week. So that on average there's enough water without any supplemental irrigation. Of course, it always doesn't come in those nice weekly increments like we might want. It's either a deluge like we've experienced now, or we'll have several weeks without any rain at all. So that you want to figure out some way to hold that water in between the rainstorms.
A couple of months, maybe.
Next, please. I feed my lawn in early spring with weak organic fertilizer that provides diverse nutrients and builds the moisture holding capacity of the soil. The organic fertilizers, which you can buy at Noonan's, I might add, provide a whole spectrum of micronutrients, including iron, which actually greens up your lawn nicely. I also add a little 10-10-10 to stimulate the growth, because the organic fertilizer is very weak. And I add lime also. I mix this all in a wheelbarrow and just put it in the spreader and put it out twice a year. The lime neutralizes acid rain and also helps me see where I've applied the fertilizer if I use a white powdered lime. Someone said something about moss, and that lime brings the pH up. And I had some moss in my backyard and I put some lime on, and I never forget, this was back quite a few years, and I was really surprised. The whole moss just turned brown. It did not like that lime at all. But the grass loves it. So that's a good way to kind of tip the scales in favor of your lawn if you don't like the moss. Some people like moss in their lawn. It depends on what you want. But. And then April showers come along and wash the whole mix in, and this, you can see the line between that's my property line. It's green on the right is mine, and I love my neighbor, he makes me look so good. Okay, next please. Organic content boosts the moisture holding capacity of the soil, sort of like Mike's crystals here, which have now nicely filled up the whole thing from one little teaspoon. The organic content holds moisture like Mike's crystals. And so I want to try to increase the organic content of my soil. I use a mulching mower with a sharp blade and cut the grass tall at about 3 inches. By cutting it tall, it shades the roots and it doesn't stress the plant as much. I leave the grass clippings and shredded leaves on the lawn to decompose and nourish earthworms, unlike others who do extra work. They cut the grass with a bag on the side and then lug it across the street and dump it. And they're basically throwing away the nutrients and the beneficial organic content that they pay good money for to produce, and then they throw it away. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Earthworms fertilize and aerate the soil, and if you leave those clippings on the lawn, you've probably heard the term night crawler. Those worms come up and they crawl along the surface. You can find them with a flashlight if you're a fisherman. You're looking for bait. You can look around in your lawn and find them. They are going to come up and feed on organic matter on the surface, and then in the day dive back down, and they're dragging those nutrients, those organic nutrients back into the soil. Yes, Mike?
On the lime too, it also breaks down clippings.
Yep.
Not only does it raise the pH, but it helps things decompose faster,
Right.
which makes the grass clippings more beneficial.
And again,
to the lawn.
if I'm not mistaken, you can get lime at Noonan's too. There's another product that you can use. It's really nice to have a place like Noonan's right here in Georgetown. Makes it easy. Yes, you have a question?
Mulching your grass over a season can add as much nitrogen as one fertilizer application, whether it's organic or otherwise. Generally, about a pound of nitrogen is added to the lawn throughout the season by mulching.
Thank you. No, it's good stuff, you know, so don't throw away those valuable clippings.
How often can you lawn?
I do it twice a year, but it depends on how much you're putting down. But I just mix it in with the fertilizer in the early spring and the early fall and let the seasonal, you know, rains just wash it in. I've been doing this for more than a decade, and my lawn seems to be happy, so next please. Oh, that you've already advanced. Excess nutrient, you have to be careful though. One of the reasons I use really low test fertilizers because excess nutrients can cause pollution in nearby streams and ponds. I don't want to overdo it. My weak mix of organic fertilizer, 1010 and lime, contains about 5% nitrogen, and I apply about 20 pounds of stuff per 1,000 square feet, which means about 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. And that's, you don't want to get beyond that. That's enough to feed your lawn. You want to keep it a little bit hungry so that it uptakes all the nutrients that you're putting down, and excess nutrients doesn't wind up fouling the local waterways. Next, please. By August, the grass is tired of growing, and I am tired of mowing. It's a good time to go on vacation. You know, you roll with the seasons here, folks. I mean, it's partly a question of having a beautiful lawn part of the year, but it's also part of a question of sort of recognizing that nature has its rhythms and rolling with them, and accepting the fact that your lawn may not look quite as perfect in August as you might like, but like I say, go on vacation, or just don't mow as often. I mean, that's a relief after all the mowing you do in the spring. And Jackson Manick will have something to say about that in a little while, about slow-growing grass. Next, please. In September, I fix any bare spots and oversee with drought-tolerant, deep-rooted native grass seed. That's another aspect of the magic formula, is to use the right kind of native grass that's adapted to the conditions in New England, so you don't have to water. I cover the seed. Here is a strip that I planted along the road, a very difficult place to grow grass because of road salt that accumulates there every winter. So I fixed it up a year or two ago, and I planted this, actually this Pearls Premium grass seed here, which is deep-rooted, drought-tolerant grass seed. And I put it in the strip here, and I covered it, like I said, with a thin layer of like peat moss and soil, and I mixed about 50-50. I put the peat moss in to hold that moisture. It's real fluffy stuff, and you just put down enough to cover the grass seed so you can't see it anymore, but not too much, because otherwise it will get smothered. And then, you know, a month later, that's what it looked like. It looked like a chia pet. came up beautiful. Next please. Second application of weak organic fertilizer and lime in the early fall improves the soil and strengthens the turf for the next year. You can see my equipment, just a wheelbarrow and a spreader. I forgot to put a shovel in the picture. I use a shovel just to mix the stuff in the wheelbarrow, but it's work. It takes me 2 or 3 hours. I've got an acre of land and about maybe 1/3 of an acre of grass. And it takes me 2 or 3 hours in the spring, 2 or 3 hours in the fall, so call it 6 hours a year. I got invested in this, but I save all the money from the water I don't use from irrigating, so it really does pay for itself. Next, please. Only drought-tolerant grass survives in my yard. The roots are deep as a result of chasing moisture after rainstorms. What happens if we get a rainstorm and it might not rain for a few more weeks, and that water just moves right down through the soil, and the roots are chasing it, and over time, those roots get very well established, very deep, and they're reaching down to those moisture zones where they can allow them to survive through the long, dry, hot spells. Next, please. And in addition to my lawn, I also have a garden out back about 20 by 20, and I just keep adding compost to it to, again, get that organic matter into the soil, which provides nutrients and also holds the moisture. And you can see the bucket I keep here, and a little thing, some various containers, I'll leave them strewn around there, and when it rains, the accumulates in them, I just throw it on the garden. It's very convenient. Or if I don't have enough that way, I just get a couple of watering cans and water from the house. But, you know, it doesn't need very much water because it's got all that organic content in the soil. Next, please. So to summarize, organic matter in the soil holds moisture, so leave the clippings and shredded leaves in the fall. You know, when the leaves come down, just run the mower over them and grind them up with the grass clippings and leave them there to decompose. Apply weak organic fertilizer and lime in the early spring and early fall to encourage healthy growth. Grass doesn't like real acid soil. It likes more of a neutral or slightly alkaline soil, and in New England, we have these power plants in Ohio, and the prevailing winds bring all this acidity from the sulfuric acid that these power plants belch out. So in order to counteract that, I keep adding a little lime, which neutralizes that extra acid. Cut the grass tall. I go 3 inches. I mean, maybe you go to 2 3/4 or 3 1/4. You know, you'll have to experiment in your own yard, but keep the mower set tall. And use a sharp mower blade, because when you cut the grass with a sharp blade, it shears it. If it's dull, it kind of tears it. And when you have a ragged, torn edge to the grass, it bleeds out moisture for a much longer period than if it's sliced nice and even, so you're losing moisture. Avoid pesticides that kill the beneficial worms. Why would you want to kill the worms? They're your friends, right? A period of dormancy in late summer is natural. Well-established turf will green up again in the fall. Don't try to fight nature's rhythms. Drought-tolerant native grasses can make a beautiful lawn without irrigation, saving money and helping the environment. And this is our logo here for the Georgetown Water Conservation Program. Drop 10%. We're trying to see if we can get everybody in town to squeeze 10% out of their water usage. So that's what I have to say. And if there are any questions, otherwise next we have Jackson Madnick with some what I call a magic bullet. It's a product that well, he'll explain it. I'll leave it to Jackson to talk about. Yes.
Drip irrigation?
Yeah, great stuff. A lot of work to put it in.
What would you say about it?
Well, I would say that it's particularly good for agriculture. It theoretically, and I think some people do have them under lawn, but
In gardens, I would think that'd be more.
in gardens, yeah, I mean, it depends, sure. I mean, drip irrigation, fine, you're delivering the water right to the roots where it's needed. You're not throwing it up in the air, so sure, that's a great solution, far superior. But for a lawn, I think you might find it's kind of impractical. But for a garden, sure, yeah. Any other questions? Jackson?
Hi, my name is Jackson Madnick, and I'm an environmentalist, and I want to thank the Paul for putting on the series, and and doing things here in the community as well as the school system, and the vision of that, and also the water department for a grant to help them. And also Noonan's, also locally, that has lots of organic and good products. I've been concerned about water and giving talks about organic lawn care for many years. And I've always liked a nice green lawn for all the reasons we like a green lawn. But I've always hated all the work, the fertilizer runoff, the stuff, and all the cutting, the water use, and all that. And I was on my town surface water quality committee as the chairperson for 7 years. And in Wayland, as in many of the communities in Massachusetts, we have a major problem with invasive weeds. And also I'm on the board of directors for the state, this organization called COLAP, the Congress of Lake and Pond Associations in Massachusetts. And 90% of our lakes and ponds are choked with invasive weeds. And part of the problem with that is many communities use herbicides to get rid of the invasive weeds. It's quick and easy. However, low levels of the herbicides, pesticides, lawn care fertilizer all end up in our drinking water. So what people put on our lawns ends up in our glass. And so about 8 years ago, I wanted to see if there was some way to have a green lawn without using chemical fertilizer. Again, it's much better to use organic fertilizer. There's a big difference in which Noonan has organic as well as chemical fertilizer. And so I started researching different kinds of lawn and seeds from all over the world that took less water and less fertilizer. And after a 3-year period of growing different grasses, about 75 different kinds of grasses, I found there wasn't really one that was really soft, really lush, really nice, and at the same time that it took very low maintenance. So I wanted to see if I could maybe create a better mousetrap, and I engaged the services of 3 PhDs from 3 different agricultural universities, and I said, can you help me develop a low maintenance lawn that's good for New England? I should mention there was a phenomenon of nature that a woman discovered while doing on a nature walk with her husband in Canada. And in August, where everything was brown and dormant, and as far as you could see, there was one little clump of rich, lush growing grass. And she's a wildflower expert. She said, well, this is strange. Why is this grass, green where everything else is brown? So she had a little trowel with her for digging up wildflower specimens, and she started digging down. She noticed that the grass that was brown next to this had roots that were 3 or 4 inches deep. This grass had roots almost 12 inches deep. And she said, well, what is this? So she dug up she dug down, got all the roots, brought it back and had them analyze it at an agricultural university. We actually did a DNA test to actually type the seeds. They found there was 7 very common fescue grasses that grow in Canada. And then so she mixed the seeds together to try and grow, duplicate what nature had done, and she couldn't do it. It didn't have the same phenomena. Then she went back there and dug up another plug of this green grass, and this time she had them actually count the numbers of seeds of the different types. And then she duplicated those exact proportions, and this phenomena happened, that it grew deeper roots, it grew slower. And so it wasn't just the seeds, it was the percentages of seeds. And so I was growing some of that, but the problem with that grass from Canada, it grew beautifully where it came from, but it didn't grow well here. It was bunching, it had a bunching phenomenon. It almost looked like polka dots. It was dense, thin, dense, thin. If you like a lawn that's polka dotted, it's fine. But I thought maybe nature would evolve something for our climate that was similar to this phenomenon. So I engaged the service of 3 PhDs from 3 different agricultural universities, guys that all they do and think about and talk about is grass, and they're part of the National Turf Evaluation Program. And I engaged them to help me find a low maintenance grass, and they said, well, that's strange, no one's ever asked us about low maintenance. They always want to know high maintenance, the people who hired us. you know, more water, more fertilizer, reseeding, you know.
Wonder why.
Why? And so, so after a period, they helped me come up with some special seeds to test 1,000 with what was you know, it doesn't grow great, but you don't have to water it. And, but, you know, as a 3-year-old, they hammer questions into the ground. She said, "Daddy, is that really the best?" I said, "Yeah, it's the best." "But Daddy, could there be a better?" "But Daddy," you know, and she asked me about 10 different ways, and then I started thinking about the fact is, let's see if we can make something better. And so I named it after Pearl, because she started this whole, you know, me on this line of request, and developed this grass. So, basically, what I'm going to do is, in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about lawns in general, to have a lower maintenance lawn that saves you time, money, water with your existing lawn. You can take it one step further with this, these special seeds, but just general lawn care. Next, please. The whole idea of sustainability and taking care of our environment started with some of the writings of Thoreau. Well, before that, the American Indians protecting our environment. And then Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring in 1962, who started the modern environmental movement. And then today, Bill McKibben, Al Gore, and other folks are carrying on. And then the average person cares about the environment. Next, please. And the reason why we want to care about our environment, you know, I don't want to be redundant. Paul and already spoke about this before, but Earth is our home, and we're trying to protect the environment for us and children and future generations. And everything is connected. What we do over here affects over there. And as I say, we're all pond abutters. And people say, "Well, I don't live anywhere near a pond." Well, you do. If you live a mile, 2 miles away from the pond, whatever you put on your lawn runs off your lawn, down the street, into the storm drain, and guess what? Ends up in the local pond. So we're all pond abutters, no matter where we live. And it doesn't run off your pond, it runs into your local stream, lake, or the ocean. And all local actions matter. Next. In environmentalism now and landscape design, people are looking at buildings, looking at landscaping and their interaction. There's something called LEED, or Leadership in Environmental Design, under the U.S. Green Building Council. And it's the same thing as Energy Star is for appliances in terms of using less energy, but they're looking at buildings and looking at landscape to use less water and energy. There's a number of federal mandates. There's a lot of incentives right now that actually can save you money, and there's a lot of awareness. People really care about taking care of the environment, and at the same time saving a whole lot of money. That's useful. Next, please. There's some sustainability trends that I'm not going to go into today. I just want to throw out these words. Rain gardens that take the excess runoff from your property and use it up with certain plants that soak up the water in low areas of your land. There's also mulching and a concept called xeriscaping, getting rid of your lawn, which is what some people say to have less work. However, I like to think of it as you can still have, you know, your cake and eat it too, or you can have your lawn and not the work. So as an alternative to xeriscaping. There's green roofs, there's treatments of roofs and walls that can absorb water and hold water so it doesn't run off. Then there's, rather than having concrete or tar lawns and grass, you can have permeable pavers so the water returns back to the earth. Cisterns, other things. There's shading plants that you can plant on the southern part, the southern side of your house that blocks the summer sun, but then lets light through. And then there's sustainable grass. Of all these things, the most bang for the buck, the easiest thing to do is sustainable grass. All these other things, they're good methods, but they take more money, time, and effort. Next, please. The case for having a sustainable lawn, to taking your front lawn and making it more sustainable, it's one of the most effective solutions, it's easy to do. Lawns, typical lawns are a source of frustration, you know, if the people are cutting them once a week and using a lot of water and so on. I'm gonna talk about a lawn you only have to, never have to water again. You only have to cut once, every couple of weeks or once a month, and rapid payback, a method that you can, that will pay back for itself in a week. You can also reduce the health risk to your family and your pets, and cut chemical runoff into the water supply, and you can save a lot of money, time, and water. Next. There's three kinds of grass that take no water after they're established, and that don't necessarily grow around here. There's zoysia grass and buffalo grass that grows in the Midwest, and they have a sort of a hard shell, and that's how they keep their water. They're sort of like the grass is a kind of a container. And then there's Pearl's Premium that we developed that keeps water by a whole other method. Next, please. This is Pearl's Premium. Pearl's Premium grows 12-inch roots. Again, it's the interaction of these special seeds in these exact proportions. If you change the proportions even 5%, the phenomena goes away, and it doesn't have such deep roots. So because it has, and the other factor is it grows very, very slow. It grows at 1/4 the rate of bluegrass. So because it grows at 1/4 rate of bluegrass, it only needs 1/4 amount of nutrients and only needs a 1/4 amount of water. And then the other part of it is half of the seeds are native to this climate. They were here before the American Indians, so it belongs here, as opposed to bluegrass doesn't belong here. It was brought in from Europe. And so between the deep roots, the slow growth, and the fact that it's at least half the seeds are native and the rest are adapted to this climate. Next, please. And there's been a lot of, there's been 29 sort of rave reviews and positive reviews from this old house through some, and they confirmed that you only have to mow it once a month versus once a week. The Boston Globe wrote a very good story. ABC TV, Fox TV, the New York Times is doing a big feature on this in a couple weeks, and so on. So it's at this point, after we developed it, we have a worldwide patent on it, a patent pending on it, and there's over 3,000 lawns of this in the country. There's a number of lawns here in Georgetown, and your water department is actually going to be growing a lawn right out in front of the water department. And there's been about 20 or 30 people who bought seed. And the way that you can tell, in the winter our lawns are green when other lawns are brown, and because of because it's a native seed. Next, please. And there's a lot of there's quite a few uses that people are using it right now. You know, for low traffic areas in parks, traffic circles, public buildings, swim and tennis clubs, cemeteries, golf courses in the low traffic areas, and of course, you know, homes and residences. Next. And again, I don't want to be redundant. Paul has already talked about some of these concepts. These are the major concepts to have with your existing lawn right now, to have it be lower maintenance and the how and why. And again, Paul went over some of these things. If you use a sharp blade, you're actually cutting the grass. If you use a dull blade, you're tearing the grass, not cutting it. And a sharp blade has very little surface area that cauterizes the same day, whereas a dull blade will take a number of days. And not only will the moisture go out, the disease can go in, and your grass can be sick. If you have a dull blade, generally the day after, a couple of days after, your lawn can be brown. Many times this summer when people have a brown lawn, it's not because the lawn's dry, it's because your lawnmower blade is dull. By just sharpening the blade, you'll have a much better looking lawn. And it's very simple. You just unplug the spark plug wire so it doesn't start up, you don't lose any fingers. Very important. Unplug the spark plug wire, clean it up, and you take a $3 file from a hardware store and just sharpen it at the angle of the bevel of the blade. Just takes a minute or two, and your lawn will look massively better.
How often should you sharpen your blade?
It depends on how big your lawn is. You can do it just once or twice.
3,500 square feet.
How big?
3,500.
Once or twice a summer. It's not that big a deal. I mean, and it will make a big difference, maybe twice a summer. But that depends on how often you cut it. I'm gonna talk about a lawn you only cut once a month, so you'd only chop it once a summer. But a typical lawn that you cut every week, you might have to chop it 2 times or more. Besides the sharp blade, the next thing is cutting high. If your grass is cut 1 inch short, you might have 2 to 3 inch roots. If your typical grass cut 3 inches high, you might have 6 inch roots. And with Pearl's Premium, cutting 3 inches high, you have 12 inch roots. And why is this important? As Paul said before, a lot of the, we have in New England and other places, these quick downpours, and it comes down, and most of the water goes right by those shallow roots. So when the wind and the sun dries out the lawn, typical short grass, it's like parched. It's like where's water? But the water's there, just beyond the reach of the roots, just down below. And if you take typical grass and cut it higher and you have deeper roots, it's accessing more of that water that came in. And then if you go for like extreme roots, like 12 inches, it's accessing most of the water that comes in a quick, short rain. Next, if you leave the clippings, as Paul said, with Pearl's Premium, if you leave the clippings in place, you get 50%, because it grows so slow and needs so little nutrients, you get 50% of the nutrients that your lawn needs by just leaving the clippings in place. Don't take them away. And sometimes with quicker growing grass, where the clippings will take 2 or 3 weeks to break down with a mulching mower, you can actually over time build, if your lawn isn't really healthy, full of microbes like Paul's lawn, the clippings can build up and create this sort of dry stuff called thatch and kind of smother your lawn. With a slower growing lawn like Pearl's Premium, where you only cut it once a month, then in between that 1 month period, the clippings have a time to break down, so they never build up. So most of the clippings are gone and returned back to the soil. Then the next thing is you can either top spread an organic compost once or twice a year, the spring and fall, or you can top spread compost. Compost is fantastic. Compost is, in every handful of compost, there's 100 million microbes. And some of those microbes get rid of weeds, grubs, it fertilizes the soil, slow release for a year. It aerates, the microbes go down to the soil and they fluff up and actually decompact the soil, aerate the soil. And also they encourage worms, as Paul said, how important they are. So you put these things together by a sharp blade, you cut high, so this is not losing water this way, cutting high because you have deep roots, it's accessing more of the rain. You leave the clippings in between the blades so that it acts as a mulch, holds the moisture in. You put those things together and you don't have to water your lawn anymore, except for droughts. Yes?
I have 2 questions that you might touch on, but they're in my head right now, I don't
Yeah.
want to lose them.
No, yeah.
How much does this spread, so if you don't want it where it,
It doesn't spread out.
It doesn't?
Pearl spread, yeah. The good and the bad of Pearl's Premium is it goes where you put it. It's, the seeds are meant to just like stay there, very little spreading. So if you can make a line, it doesn't go into your neighbor's lawn, it doesn't go into your flower bed. That's the good part. The bad part is if you don't put the seeds here, it's not gonna just naturally grow over there.
Okay, and the other thing is once you've planted this and you decide, I'm gonna take this up because I'm gonna put a plant, flower garden here or something, how hard is it to get up?
You can dig it up. It's a little bit of work because the roots go deeply. We've had people do the exact same thing. They have their gardener come in and the gardener will remark, oh my gosh, these are deep, thick roots. And so you can cut it up, but it's not
I think
impossible.
we don't make sod out of it.
No, well, we're going to see about making it down the road, making sod, but right now it's only, well, the thing is making sod that you cut it away and then quickly plant so it regrows its roots. Yes?
I have almost an acre and I have gardens, but sometime when I'm starting a new flower bed, I put my shovel in and it's granite, it's rocks.
Yeah.
How do those roots get around all
Oh,
those
okay.
rocks? Because I don't want to
Yes.
dig.
No, you don't have to dig. It's via the fact that it's native, That's one of the things that belongs here versus something brought in that doesn't belong here. That helps a lot. The fact that it grows really slow, it doesn't need much, it helps a lot. The thing is, if there's a foot of soil it can access, it'll go down there. But if it doesn't, it works with whatever it has. There's people in the Cape that have 2 inches of soil above ledge that are growing Pearl's Premium very nicely.
So they have 12 inches going this way.
Yeah, it goes where it can. You know, it is not quite, it's not a weed, it's a native grass, but it survives. It's a very, you know, people call it miracle grass. Newspapers have called it the holy grail of grass. You know, it's just very good grass. You know, it's just, people can call it whatever they want. It's just native, slow grow, low maintenance. And this is what we had. There are some grasses that are more durable, but they take more watering, they take more nutrients and stuff like that. So we were going for low maintenance as our target.